21. President von der Leyen will deliver the readout from the college meeting which took place this morning. She is accompanied by two members of the college, Commissioner Reynders and Commissioner Breton, who are directly involved in some of the measures that we are going to announce today. President, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dana. Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here with the commissioners, indeed, Reynders and Breton, to present to you the main results of today's college meeting. A main part of our discussion was the regulation for the digital green certificate, and allow me to touch briefly on it. Firstly, what is the function of this certificate? It shows or states whether the person has either been vaccinated or a recent negative test, or has recovered from COVID and thus antibodies. Secondly, the certificate will make sure that the results, or what it shows, the data, and the minimum set of data, are mutually recognized in every member state. And thirdly, with this digital certificate, we aim to help member states reinstate the freedom of movement in a safe, responsible and trusted manner. We also adopted a communication laying down a common path to a gradual, safe and lasting reopening. It points out what we need to do to get there, including a common framework for response measures and measures covering everything from testing, treatments and vaccine sharing. So these both points are aiming at the reopening, but a precondition for that is vaccination and vaccines. And therefore, I would like to give you an update on where we stand with our vaccination efforts. We are now 2 weeks before the end of the first quarter, since vaccination began in the European Union. And as you all know, as expected, the start was tough. It took time to scale up production of these new vaccines and the new technologies till we had the processes stable, the quality was at the level it was requested. So this was a difficult beginning, but the good news is that we have made progress. Now, if we look at what has been delivered, we see that BioNTech, Pfizer and Moderna are delivering on their contracts. So for the first quarter, BioNTech, Pfizer will have delivered 66 million doses, as it is contracted, and Moderna will have delivered 10 million doses, also as it has been contracted for the first quarter. But we also know that AstraZeneca has unfortunately underproduced and underdelivered, and this painfully, of course, reduced the speed of the vaccination campaign. Now, the figures are that in the first quarter, AstraZeneca was supposed to deliver 90 million doses. They reduced that at first down to 40 million. Now, their projection is that AstraZeneca will deliver 30 million doses till the end of the first quarter. If AstraZeneca delivers what they have promised now by the end of this quarter, we will have delivered overall 100 million doses to the European people by the end of March. Now we have to focus on the second quarter and the period until the summer. We know that we can achieve our target to have 70% of the adult population fully vaccinated by the end of the summer. And we know that deliveries will increase in the second quarter. Let me give you figures and the picture. One more vaccine is approved and will kick in. That is Johnson & Johnson. It will start in April. We should receive in the second quarter from Johnson & Johnson some 55 million doses. And I want to remind you that this is a one-shot vaccine. We also know that we can rely on the contracted doses by BioNTech, Pfizer. This will be 200 million doses to be delivered in quarter two. And the same goes for Moderna, another 35 million doses. As for AstraZeneca, unfortunately, they will only deliver some 70 million doses. This is down from the 180 million doses that they are contractually committed to deliver, but AstraZeneca announced that they will only be delivering 70 million doses. This is, with the numbers, the state of play for the second quarter. Now, if we have a look at the epidemiological situation, it is getting worse. It is worrisome. We see the variants, mainly B117. We see the crest of a third wave forming in member states. And we know that we need to accelerate the vaccination rates. And that brings me to my final point in this introduction, and this is export. Since the European Union has had an export authorization scheme, we now have a clearer picture on the situation. We have this export authorization scheme since the 1st of February, so it's 6 weeks. And since then, in these 6 weeks, we have received hundreds of requests for exports. In numbers, more than 300 requests for export. 314 have been granted, only one has been refused. If you put that in numbers of doses, in that time, these 6 last weeks, 41 million doses have been exported to 33 countries. And this shows that Europe is trying to make international cooperation work, whether we do it through the funding of COVAX, we are the largest funder in COVAX, or through exports to other countries. But open roads run in both directions. And this is why we need to ensure that there is reciprocity and proportionality. And I want to be clear on reciprocity. If the situation does not change, we will have to reflect on how to make exports to vaccine-producing countries dependent on their level of openness. So we are exporting a lot to countries that are themselves producing vaccines, and we think this is an invitation to be open, so that we also see exports from those countries coming back to the European Union. And the second point that is of importance for us, we will reflect on whether exports to countries who have higher vaccination rates than us are still proportionate. In other words, we want reliable deliveries of vaccines. We want to increase in the contracts. We want to see reciprocity and proportionality in exports. And we are ready to use whatever tool we need to deliver on that. This is about making sure that Europe gets its fair share. We will invest even further in Europe's capacity also beyond this acute phase. We are working with trusted companies to ensure long-term supply, and these are the messages I will take to the leaders at the next European Council.
Thank you very much. I will now open the floor to questions, but allow me to remind you first that immediately after this press conference there will be a technical briefing on the Green Digital Certificate, where you can also ask many questions of a more technical nature. So there are many hands raised, and at this stage I would like to give the floor to Nikos. Nikos, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nikos. All good. Go ahead.
Yes. Madam President, you said that the EU should use all available tools to secure vaccine supplies. Does this mean also, for example, invoking Article 122 and effectively seizing production or waiving intellectual property rights or anything of the sort to secure vaccine supplies for member states? And will you raise this issue with leaders at the summit next week?
Well, you're mentioning a legal basis that has already been used once in the 1970s in the oil crisis. And my answer is all options are on the table. We are in the crisis of the century. And I'm not ruling out anything for now, because we have to make sure that Europeans are vaccinated as soon as possible. Human lives, civil liberties, and also the prosperity of our economy are dependent on that, on the speed of vaccination, on moving forward. So vaccine production and vaccine deliveries in the European Union must have a priority. And indeed, I would also like to discuss this whole picture with the heads of state and government.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Bjorn Finke. Bjorn, are you there?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, Bjorn, all good. We see you, we hear you.
Excellent. Excellent, yeah, because I had some problems last time. Anyway, thanks a lot for this opportunity. I was just curious, this export restriction announcement, what does that mean? I mean, do we introduce new criteria for states who want to get vaccines from the European Union, or how would this work?
So we have in place the export authorization mechanism, and that is good. We have it in place since 6 weeks now, and I must say, since then we have transparency. We know what's going on. Before that, we were blind. We had no clue what was being exported, in what dimension and how. And it is, as I said, an invitation for openness. Because the European Union is the most open region, has been the most open region in the last 6 weeks. When I see the numbers of export, I say again, 41 million doses to 33 countries. This is outstanding. But we also want to see reciprocity. Because it is hard to explain to our citizen why vaccines produced in the European Union are going to other countries that are also producing vaccines, but hardly nothing is coming back to the European Union. And therefore, it is an openness, it's an offering of openness, but we want reciprocity. We want to see that there's also a flow not only in one direction, but vice versa.
I will now try to give the floor to Marco Bresolin, hoping that he's there. Marco.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Marco, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Marco Bresolin from the Italian newspaper La Stampa. Is a follow-up to my colleague's question. Because, President, you mentioned the reciprocity. You didn't name any country, but we have seen that EU has exported around 9 million doses to the UK. That is a country who receives vaccine produced in Europe, but these are vaccines produced by mostly Pfizer, who is respecting the contract, and the UK is producing AstraZeneca vaccines that is not respecting the deal with the Commission. So my first question is, are you ready to evaluate to stop of the export also of vaccines produced by companies that are respecting the deliveries? And a second related question, another country who is receiving vaccine from Europe but who is not sending back any vaccine is US. So Are you in touch with the US administration on this issue, since they have a lot of stock of AstraZeneca vaccines and they have not approved this vaccine yet? Thank you.
Thank you so much. With the US, the reciprocity is given because there are no exports, you're right, from vaccines from the US to the European Union, but vice versa. There are also no exports from the European Union to the United States. And there is a seamless flow back and forth of pre-products and raw materials and drug substance, so all the products that are necessary to finally produce vaccines. And this is going back and forth intensively with the US. So there, reciprocity is given. What the UK is concerned, indeed, we have observed that in the last 6 weeks, actually 10 million doses by now have been exported to the UK. It is the country number one, what exports from the European Union is concerned. And indeed, what the United Kingdom is producing AstraZeneca. In our contract with AstraZeneca, there are even 2 sites in the UK that are put in the contract for potential deliveries for the European Union. We're still waiting for doses to come from the UK. So this is an invitation to show us that there are also doses from the UK coming to the European Union so that we have reciprocity.
Thank you very much. I will now try to give the floor to Susanna. Susanna, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. I have a question on the digital green certificate. I would like to ask you, does it have an expiration date? Do you think this will be useful once the group immunity is achieved? I mean, in September already. So aren't we just losing time by trying to create something that at some point will no longer be useful? And I also would like to understand how it will work for those traveling by car. I'm thinking about Spanish people Spaniards going to Portugal or to France. How are you going to control this? Should those people also hold a certificate? Thank you.
Thank you.
No, maybe on your question, I want to say that we are working since a lot of time with the member states since the outbreak of the pandemic to see how it's possible to ensure the free movement of people, and so also by car from one country to another one. And we have tried to organize that with recommendations. It was the case in October last year. We have amended that in February this year. And now we are going further. There's a lot of things to do at the level of the member state, but what we try to provide, it's a tool. And it's a tool with a so-called digital green certificate or COVID certificate, so to indicate the different elements that it's possible to provide. So, like was said by the President, it's possible to use 3 types of information: the recovery from the disease, the vaccination and the testing. Of course, it will be for just the time of the COVID-19 crisis. So it's a temporary instrument. We don't want to prolong that. When it will be possible for the World Health Organization to say that we are at the end of the pandemic, we'll stop with such an instrument. And of course, we are just thinking about the possibility to reactivate the instrument later, but I'm not hoping that if we have a new pandemic in the future. But that will be with a delegate act or with the Parliament involved in the process. So it's for the COVID-19. And the control is the same control than now. You know that if you want to go from one member state to another one by different transport systems, it's possible to organize a real control. I want just to insist on one fact. From Spain to Portugal or from another country to another one, we want to avoid any discriminations with our instruments. So we are not discussing about the use of the instrument, the possible way to lift some restrictions. It will be the decision of the member states. We don't want to say if it's possible to use for something else than travel, because here we are organizing all legal instruments on the basis of free movement. But we want to be sure that it's possible for the people to use also test and maybe quarantine if it's requested by the member states, like now. Why? But you know, it's not a mandatory vaccination that we have in Europe, so it's possible for people to refuse to be vaccinated. And it's also impossible for some people who want to be vaccinated to receive now the vaccine because they are not in the priorities in the different strategy. So we are providing a sort of possibility to receive in a digital form or on paper, a real instrument without any discrimination between the different citizens. And again, if you are travelling by car, of course it's possible to organise the same control than now. We have many controls for the moment in the European Union about the travels, also inside the EU. It will be for all the EU citizens, for their families, well, when they are living in the EU or when they are living abroad. We are organising the process for all those people, also for the economic area, for the European economic area, because we want to work also in the same way with Norway, with Ireland, with Liechtenstein, and we try to provide in our regulation the same system for Switzerland. Of course, maybe a last word. We have also another instrument coming from home, from internal affairs, to extend in the future the same instrument, of course, for third countries and citizens from the third countries coming to Schengen and coming with maybe a possible to stay or to have a residence in Europe for the future. So it's very important to insist on this. And again, the control will be organised by the member states, and we want to come with a very good instrument. But of course, there is a lot of things to do at the level of the member states to implement that with a digital tool, and will help the member states with the support in their way to introduce a digital tool. And our intention is to do that before the summer, so to be ready in June, maybe, not only with our instrument. We are going to the co-legislators. We have started already the discussions with the Parliament and the Council. And we want to be ready with the legal instrument, the binding legal instrument, before the summer, but also with the digital tool before the summer. So it will be very important to reorganise free movement, not only for tourists, also for workers and for many other purposes, but it's the goal that we have. And then, at the end of the pandemic, we will stop, because at the end of the pandemic, we will go back to a normal use of the free movement and the freedom of free movement for all the citizens.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Verena from DPA. Verena, are you there? So we are waiting until Verena is connected.
Can you hear me?
That's it, Verena, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the question. Eine Frage auf Deutsch, wenn ich das richten.
In German, to the President. You spoke about export restrictions in the future. Is this basically a block vis-à-vis Great Britain or other countries? Is that what you're talking about? And then on the US, you said that there is reciprocity, but 1 million doses have moved from the EU to America, to the US, but nothing has come back. How do you express that in terms of balance? You suggested a balance, the answer. It's important that we exit the crisis as quickly as possible so that we can help others. That's what it's all about. And we have to be able to explain to the people in Europe also how it is that we deliver, that our pharmaceutical companies deliver to the whole world, but we have difficulties within the Union and are faced difficulties caused by or because of the pharmaceutical companies. We export to 30 countries, but nothing comes back, nothing comes to us from countries that do produce, and that has to be looked at. It's important that we create transparency and that we continue these discussions. Clearly, it's not just about the interest of Europeans, but I am the President of the European Commission, and I have to defend the citizens of Europe. We have to find a balance, is what it's all about. We have to be in a situation where there is reciprocity, and that in countries who are producing, that we have discussions, and that there be a bit of a balance. Second thing, we do see that there are pharma companies, BioNTech, for example, who stabilize their processes very well, who are delivering, who are reliable. And then there's another block, and we want to invest in these reliable companies, create partnerships, long-term investment, and we're prepared to ensure that there are supplies for the future and to make sure that they have security, investment, so that they can build their capacity, these reliable partners.
Pink is there.
Yes, hello. Auch auf Deutsch, wenn ich darf.
The Austrian press is saying that Mr. Kurz has stated that he's fought for a redistribution mechanism between member states. He's also said that the 10 million from BioNTech, that 400,000 doses would go to Austria. It would have been about 200,000. So there's been a redistribution, he claims. So my question is, were you involved in these discussions that Mr. Kurz is talking about? Is it all right? Is it right? Is it correct that Austria is getting a disproportionately large amount, and maybe other countries as well, Latvia or and what about the reserves that are not being used in some countries now? What's happening to them? Should they be going to countries who want to vaccinate more quickly? What are you doing with the ones that are not being taken up in some countries? So some of these things, indeed, are the responsibility of member states. So I've tried to address areas where the Commission plays a role. We've always said what our recommendations are, that the distribution be done on a basis of population. And I still regard that as the best solution. Member states, though, have decided another approach. Some of them, they started by distributing on a population basis, but not all member states took up what was available. So some of the doses were not taken up. So there was a second redistribution amongst member states who were prepared to take more. So if you look at this process, amongst 6 vaccines, you can see that member states have built up different portfolios, different mixtures, the ones that they see as right. And you can see differences in the behaviour of the companies. BioNTech, Pfizer has been very good. AstraZeneca, not so much. And so this has given a different picture in terms of what has actually been available in different member states. So what have I done? Well, I've tried to discuss with BioNTech, Pfizer, that 10 million from the contracts be moved to the second quarter, and this might be exactly the right amount to rebalance the situation that we have in the first quarter. So whether we can actually do this and how this happens is something that the member states will have to answer. I can't give an answer, but that's my recommendation.
Athanasios?
Thanks very much. Athanasios, Star TV Greece and CNA. To anyone who can answer, the basic issue, the reason we are here and we need the certificates, I can imagine, is about trust. Member states don't trust each other. They fear, and this is prevailing in the audience, that someone coming from outside might, infect more than someone who's coming from another city of the same country. So how do you remedy this perception issue, which is fundamentally wrong in the European sphere of things, with your proposal? How exactly is trust going to be restored in the in between the member states with the green certificate proposal? Thanks.
Well, thanks for your question, because of course trust in many policies, but certainly during the pandemic, it's an important element. And we want to build maybe a real trust with the member states and with the citizens through a common instrument. So we don't want to have a fragmentation with many different kinds of instruments in the different member states. And here, when we are coming with a new tool, so such a COVID certificate or a digital green certificate, is to be sure that it will be possible to each and every one citizen in Europe to receive such a certificate without any discrimination and with the certainty that there is an insurance, so it's a right to receive a certificate free of charge, and it will be also possible to ask to the other member states to accept the certificate with indications of many different things. And again, to be very clear about trust, we want to put on the certificate, of course, the recovery from the disease, the test, if there are some tests, but also the vaccination, with the date of the vaccination, what kind of dose, and approval authorised or not by EMA. But it will be, of course, to the member states to decide about the possible use. I mean, just to give an example, it will be, of course, an obligation for all the member states to accept the certificate with a vaccination, with a vaccine approved by or authorised by EMA. If it's not authorised by EMA, it's a choice for the member states to do that or not. So we want to be very transparent, and it's the best way to build trust and to have the same instrument for all the different member states, but more than that, because you spoke about the citizens, for the citizens it will be a right to receive such a kind of certificate free of charge and to use that, first of all, for the travels, because, again, we are in charge of the free movement of people and we are working with such a legal basis. So it's the best way to try to build such a kind of confidence, and to do that I want to say that we are coming with a proposal to the member states, and we want to discuss with the co-legislators. We will have an open debate with the Parliament, an open debate with the member states, and of course there is a lot of things to do at the level of the member states to organise the process with digital instruments, and for that we have provided also some support. It's not so far than 50 million euro to help the member states to do that. So we try to do our best to build trust, and we count also on you to help us to build the trust with the citizens.
Maybe if I may add one single point on the technical solution. The technical solutions, of course, is also part of trust. And that's why we have worked with member states, so that now we are all together on the same page. We share exactly the same technology. We keep, of course, GDPR at very high level. We will not exchange data. And the good news is that all member states have shared this view now. And this is extremely important because, of course, trust is also when you will move from one country to the other one, that everybody will know that just with your QR code, you will know if what is on your certificate and if it is validated. That's, of course, a very important element of trust.
We'll now invite Isabelle to ask her question. Isabelle Horry. Isabelle, est-ce que tu es là?
Isabelle, are you there? Isabelle, can you hear us?
Il paraît que non.
That seems not to be the case. While we await for Isabelle to reconnect, I'd like to give the floor now to Lawrence Norman. Lawrence, please.
Hi there. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me? Thanks a lot.
Yes, all good. Go ahead.
Great. A couple of questions for you, Madam President. First of all, can you give us a sense of how long this invitation for openness is open for? When will you make a decision on whether the export ban needs to be tightened? And will this be dependent in any way on you staying on course for the second quarter vaccine numbers that you have outlined today? And secondly, I'd just like to get a sense of your justification for this. I mean, we have a situation where a bunch of EU countries have stopped AstraZeneca vaccinations. We have a situation where there are millions of vaccines sitting around across the 27 member states that have not been delivered because of the systems put in place by those national governments. And effectively what you're proposing is to trigger a vaccine war with the UK. This looks awfully like another attempt to distract attention from the failures in the vaccination campaign within the EU?
So first of all, our answer depends, of course, on the response we get. So the timelines are depending on what our interlocutor say. And of course, we will watch very closely the development in the second quarter because, as I said, it is important now to deliver at rising speed. We need more deliveries in the second quarter, and that has to happen on the ground. I trust AstraZeneca. I trust the vaccines. So tomorrow, indeed, Emma will give a statement, and I'm convinced that the statement will clarify the situation. So, but the general principle I was referring to goes also for other countries that are producing vaccines. So I want to get into a discussion mode that highlights the reciprocity. And by the way, right now we are having 70 million doses delivered. Till the end of the month, it's going to be 100 million doses. So we see that the speed is picking up compared to the beginning. The beginning was tough, without any question, but this is also certainly a point, yes, where you want to come in.
No, thank you very much. Trust is also based on correct figures. 69.8, 70 million doses has been delivered today, as you said, Mrs. President. 52.4 million have been administered. 55.2 are keeping for the second dose. So it's true, it's millions, because what is remaining is 2.2 millions. Not big millions, 2.2. Just to come back to the figures, because trust, again, is based on real figures. Then, of course, what is important is that what we see on the ground is it definitely an acceleration on our capacity to produce. 40 million in January, 28 million in February, 60 million in March, and now, as you know, we target at least this is what I see on the ground, our ability to manufacture with facilities in Europe at least 300 million doses in Q2. So in other words, you see the acceleration, and I could tell you from what I see on the ground that yes, the facilities that I've seen will deliver this number. So it's true that now we are increasing on a monthly basis, and that we could be confident that yes, by end of June we will have definitely more than half of the population which will be vaccinated. Definitely, yes.
Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Bernardo de Miguel. Bernardo.
It's a question for Mr. Breton. You said that the production is accelerating, but do you think that would be necessary to add a new vaccine like the Sputnik, like the Russian one, to increase the possibility to reach the target? Thank you.
Well, I think that we are quite, in Europe, we are probably the continent when we have today the biggest portfolio of vaccines working. Already 4 vaccines, hopefully soon 5. And that's, by the way, that's very important because we have seen that in the deployment of these vaccines, you have ups and down, which is unfortunately something that we see when we have such a ramping up of the industrial capacity. And by the way, we have seen this in Q1. It's true that AstraZeneca will miss, but Pfizer will do better, and at the end of the day, we will deliver what we said, roughly 100 million doses, what we said since the beginning. In the second quarter, I gave you the figures. we have, of course, many other vaccines on the planet, which is good, because I just remind you that for our perceptions, yes, definitely before the end of the summer, Europe will be vaccinated, US will be vaccinated, but altogether it will be only 10% of the population of the planet. So yes, we will need to do what has to be done outside, and of course mainly in Africa, but not only. So on these candidates, you have of course Sputnik. Sputnik is of course probably a good vaccine, because I think Russians are pretty good scientists, and of course I would not have any reason to doubt. And by the way, they apply now to EMA to make sure that they could be able to have an agreement. We'll see. But this being said, what I could tell you on the ground is that, of course, there seems to have some difficulties today to manufacture this vaccine, and that's why we see a lot of requests to have some facilities in Europe to do it. So again, almost all our facilities today are used today to manufacture the vaccines that have been agreed. But one day or the other, I think yes, we should probably help Russia.
For Christian Spielmann. Christian, est-ce que tu es connecté?
Christian, are you connected?
Je pense, oui.
I do believe so. Yes, good afternoon. I have a question basically for everyone, if you hear me. Mrs. von der Leyen, today I heard in a member state that we are in a situation of great shortage. There that 900 doses are necessary to vaccinate everyone. How can we get assurances that everyone will be vaccinated? Young people will have to wait some months, but how can we get these assurances? Having put everything, all the eggs in one basket with AstraZeneca, isn't that a problem in certain countries? For example, Belgium, where we don't really seem to have a choice. It's AstraZeneca or nothing. And, if you don't want to AstraZeneca, then you don't get vaccinated. On the certificate, the proposal seems to be extremely ambitious, and I'm not talking about this really in superlative terms. So you're going to get an agreement with the European Parliament in 2 months. That seems a bit presumptuous. Do you have a plan B? Because in December, there was a request for a light certificate to allow people to move, to go on holiday without creating a system that would take months to set up. There seems to be some hesitancy in member states. Mr. Breton, you talk, about these smart apps, on your phone. But what about my 95-year-old mother who doesn't have a smartphone? Christian, I'll take that first question. And that first part of the question that had to do with the various figures. For Q1, we're looking at 100 million vaccines. That means 50 million vaccinated persons, because these are double-dose vaccines. In 2Q, we're expecting 300 million doses at least. Of course, if you're not very conservative, that number could go up, but we're looking at least 300 million, and there we've got Johnson & Johnson, where you only need one dose. So it's a one-jab vaccine in order to be fully vaccinated. And if you make a calculation there with J&J, 55 million, that's 55 million people vaccinated. And we've got at least 125 million people vaccinated fully within that time frame. And so with those figures, we get to way beyond 200 million persons vaccinated. The aim was 70%. 70% of people over the age of 18 to be vaccinated in the EU. So given those figures, we are really approaching that objective.
Very conservative calculations what the vaccines are concerned. So we are on a steep and reliable path. But I think we should aim at moving on faster and on delivering more and better. And that's why we have looked at the broader picture. And that's why we look at how we can nudge the companies to go into more production, but also to make sure that we have the contracts front-loaded and earlier delivery, because we need those vaccines that are being produced in Europe now, and it's important that we scale up.
Sur le certificat,
On the certificate, I would just reassure you, Mr. Spillman, for your mother, if she doesn't have a smartphone, it will be available in paper form. Well, you talked about the country that I know the best, and perhaps I could give you a presentation of many people who have been vaccinated with Pfizer-BioNTech. For people who are deemed critical, they have been vaccinated, and BioNTech Pfizer has been used. Well, you're calling us ambitious. Well, that's a compliment to the Commission. And it's an ambition through a simple document that doesn't solve all issues. We don't want to regulate the use of the document. It's up to the member states to lift or not lift restrictions on movement based on recommendations, which I talked about earlier, or they might want to use the certificate in different ways. It's ambitious, but it's very simple, and it really comes based on demand. And I met with the Conference of Presidents at the EP, and obviously it's up to the EP to decide how quickly they want to move forward. Our aim is to be ready before the summer, because also, as Thierry Breton said, we will have the digital tools, and this will allow us to have a legal tool for the member states to organize the tool and also to implement digital tools. But like has been said, for your mother and for others, it will be possible to have the certificate on paper, and so you'll have the choice, digital or paper. Plan B? No. Actually, we are working on putting all these elements together for the summer, because if the elements are not there, then we're going to be in a situation of fragmentation and completely different situations from member state to member state. Thank you very much. Now we're going to take the last question. I'd like to give the floor to Christine van Hava. Christine.
Christine, are you there? Do we have Christine? Okay. Well, in this case, I will give the floor to Peter Fritz. Peter, are you connected? You need to select the right mic source.
Yeah, should be live now. Hopefully. Okay. Frau Präsidentin, kurze Frage noch einmal zu dem Missverhältnis.
About Mr. Kurz and what he was saying about the delivery of vaccinations. I mean, he's presenting it in such a way that officials had acted without his knowledge. I mean, what do you feel about that relationship? Do you think that things were done without the politicians being involved or sufficiently on board? No, the Commission has done an exceptional job well over the last year. Officials are working day and night on this, as are officials and civil servants in the member states. The relationship and the work with the Austrians has been very, very good throughout.
Now I will try once more to see if Christine is connected. Is she there? No, she isn't. So then, donc je vais donner la parole pour la toute dernière question.
I'd like to give the floor for the final question to Jean Quatremer. Jean, are you there?
Vous m'entendez?
Can you hear me? Yes, excellent. Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. Please, go ahead.
Jean, nous te voyons.
Jean, we can hear you and we can see you. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's go. This is a question for President von der Leyen on the precautionary principle. Do you approve the application of the precautionary principle as done by Germany, followed by France, Italy, et al., and this is something that has led to a panic about the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is already suffering from a lack of confidence. Is this use of the precautionary principle something that will, as Ulrich Beth said, will this bring people in risk or out of risk? Now, on the certificate for Mr. Reinders, it's a temporary certificate. But seriously, do you think that once it is in effect, don't you think that the member states will make it permanent and put an end, finally, to the free movement among member states? Because there will be a tendency to make it permanent. And then the use of certificates. Don't you fear that, for example, to get into a restaurant, a cinema, a bar, any type of commercial location, that you'll need this? And won't this have some impact on those freedoms? Yes. Thank you.
The part you asked me, I think this shows the necessity of the market authorization process of EMA. You might remember that for a very good reason, we didn't take the shortcuts of having an emergency authorization within 24 hours, but we decided to go for the conditional market authorization that cost us 2 to 3 weeks, indeed, of delay. So that's the reason why we were later than others in our start. But it is so important that with these new technologies, these new vaccines, we have a very thorough scrutiny process what the data are concerned. It is phenomenal what science managed to do within 10 months to produce or to develop these new vaccines, but it's also necessary and was necessary to have these large worldwide clinical trials to look in every detail of the data, to then be able to say, we recommend the vaccination with that vaccine. Once again, this is injecting a biologically active substance in a healthy person. And I do trust AstraZeneca. I do trust the process in EMA. And I think it is a sign of respect also towards the scientists who have the burden of taking the responsibility to say this is safe or not, that we give them the days they need to look deep into the data of the thromboembolic events that have been reported now, and to weigh the events versus the sample of people that have been vaccinated where everything went well. So I think it is good that we have the scrutiny process. It's therefore necessary to show respect to this process, to accept that sometimes the scientists that have the responsibility need a few days to really deep dive and then come up with a very clear statement. That's what we are expecting on Thursday. And I'm glad that we did not take the shortcuts, but with all our vaccines that are approved, we took the longer but safe way to have the conditional market authorization.
Thank you. Commissioner Reinders?
Yes, very simply on your question on the certificate. Just the first thing on the temporary nature, yes, it's very clear. It's the final article of our draft regulation that provides for that. We have the possibility to suspend the certificate when the WHO declares the pandemic over. So this is dedicated to COVID-19. Now, I'm saying suspend, but through a delegated act and with the European Parliament, we could use this instrument if there were another pandemic. But basically, we're talking about a temporary solution with the Member States and with the European Parliament. Now, the use of the certificate in other areas other than the free movement of persons, we just want to facilitate the free movement of persons so that we can gradually lift restrictions based on the epidemiological situation. And if there are other uses, well, it's already the case. You can perhaps use other things that, like masks that are also imposed. There are also tests, self-tests, which are used by people. But if we go into using the certificate in other ways, we have to see if that use is necessary, proportional, and non-discriminatory, and also compatible with EU legislation. Of course, we'll examine the situation on a case-by-case basis. But I don't think we necessarily need to draw a distinction between the certificate and other measures, for example, rapid antigen tests, masks, and so forth. These are other tools that have been used. And, for example, in the cultural sector, people have been asked to have tests and use masks to enter these establishments. So we need to make sure that any further use is proportional and non-discriminatory and obviously in line with the rules of free movement.
On to Commissioner Reinders. Thank you for your questions, and please stay connected for the technical briefing on the Green Digital Certificate, which will start in a few minutes. Thank you.